There's a quiet frustration most people carry but rarely admit. You wake up early, you work hard, you try to do the right things, and yet nothing really changes. Bills keep coming. Opportunities feel distant. And no matter how much effort you put in, it feels like you're running on a treadmill that never stops. Meanwhile, somewhere else in the world, someone is making money while they sleep. Someone is growing wealth while doing less. Someone is playing a completely different game and winning. So the question begins to haunt you. Why? Why do some people stay stuck no matter how hard they work, while others seem to rise, expand, and multiply everything they touch? This is not luck. This is not fate. And it's definitely not random. In this audiobook, you're about to uncover something deeper than money. Because this is not just about why the poor stay poor. This is about how reality itself splits into two completely different worlds. One of survival and one of expansion. Welcome to Why You Stay Poor, While the Rich Get Richer. Full audiobook. In this journey, you will discover why effort alone will never make you rich, why most people are unknowingly trained to stay stuck, why the wealthy think in systems while others think in tasks, why time feels scarce for some and abundant for others, and most importantly, how to break out of the invisible patterns that keep repeating your life. This is not financial advice. This is awareness. Because once you see the game, you can never unsee it. And here's a line I want you to remember. Poverty is not just a lack of money. It's a pattern of thinking that repeats itself until you break it. If that hit you, stay with me. Because what you're about to hear might challenge everything you thought you knew about work, money, and success. And it begins with a truth most people never question. The real divide was never about income. It was always about mindset. Chapter 1. The Invisible Divide. Most people believe the gap between rich and poor is measured in numbers, salary, savings, assets. But that's not where the real divide begins. The real divide starts long before money ever enters the picture. It starts in how people see the world. Two people can live on the same street, work similar jobs, earn similar incomes, and yet, 5 years later, one is financially free and the other is still struggling. What changed? Not the environment, the interpretation of it. You see, as highlighted in the reference material, people don't just live in one shared reality. They live in different mental frameworks that shape every decision they make. One mindset is built around survival. The other is built around creation. And once you understand this, everything starts to make sense. The survival mindset asks, how do I protect what I have? How do I avoid losing? How do I stay safe? The creation mindset asks, how do I multiply this? How do I leverage this? How do I turn this into something bigger? Same world, different questions, different outcomes. Think about it. If every decision you make is based on fear, you will always choose safety over growth. And safety feels good until you realize it keeps you exactly where you are. The truth is harsh, but necessary. Most people are not poor because they lack effort. They are poor because they've been conditioned to think in ways that limit expansion. And here's the dangerous part. That conditioning feels normal. It feels responsible. It feels logical. It even feels smart. But it's not designed for growth. It's designed for control. And once that mindset is locked in, every opportunity looks risky. Every investment feels dangerous. Every leap feels impossible. So people stay where they are. not because they have to, but because their thinking tells them they should. And the longer you stay in that loop, the more permanent it feels. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had an opportunity but talked yourself out of it? Have you ever wanted to try something bigger but convinced yourself it was too risky? Have you ever said, maybe later, only to realize later never came? That's not laziness. That's programming. And until you recognize it, you will keep repeating it. Because here's the truth most people never hear. Your financial reality is a reflection of your mental patterns, not just your external circumstances. And that realization is where everything begins to shift. But before you can change your actions, you need to understand something even deeper. Why your mind is wired this way in the first place. Because in the next chapter, we're going to uncover the psychology behind staying stuck and why breaking free feels so uncomfortable even when you know you need to. Dear viewers, write which city you're from. It's interesting to see which corners of the world are watching our videos. Chapter 2. The Psychology of Staying Poor. There is a truth most people avoid because it feels uncomfortable. Being stuck is not always about external limitations. Often, it's about internal permission. You see, poverty is not just a condition. It's a state of mind that slowly becomes an identity. And once something becomes your identity, you start defending it. Think about that for a moment. If someone offers you an opportunity that feels too big, what happens? You hesitate, you doubt, you question yourself. Not because the opportunity is wrong, but because it doesn't match how you see yourself. And this is where the trap begins. Because your mind is designed to protect consistency, not growth. It wants you to stay familiar, even if that familiarity is struggle. As seen in the reference material, many people operate in a constant state of financial defense, trying to protect what little they have instead of expanding what they could create. And here's the problem with that. Defense mode limits possibility. When your focus is survival, you don't think about building. You don't think about scaling. You don't think about long-term moves. You think about getting through the week. And there's nothing wrong with survival in the beginning. But if you stay there too long, it becomes a prison. Let me explain. Imagine two people receive the same amount of money. The first person thinks, I need to make sure I don't lose this. The second person thinks, how can I use this to create more? Same resource, different outcome. One preserves, the other multiplies. And over time, that difference compounds into completely different lives. But here's where it gets deeper. This mindset doesn't appear randomly. It is learned from childhood, from environment, from conversations you didn't even realize were shaping you. Phrases like, money is hard to earn. Rich people are greedy. You have to work yourself to the bone to survive. These ideas don't just pass through your mind. They settle in. They become beliefs. And beliefs become decisions. And decisions become reality. So if you've been taught that money is scarce, you will treat it like it's always about to disappear. If you've been taught that wealth is risky, you will avoid opportunities that could change your life. If you've been taught to play it safe, you will never take the risks required to grow. And here's the most dangerous part. You won't even realize you're doing it because it feels normal. It feels like common sense. But common sense is often just common conditioning. Let me say that again. What feels logical to you may simply be what you were taught, not what is true. And this is why so many people stay stuck for decades. Not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack effort, but because they never question the patterns running their life. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself honestly, what do I believe about money? Do I see it as something limited or something expandable? Do I feel fear when I think about risk or curiosity? Do I make decisions based on avoiding loss or creating growth? Because your answers to those questions are quietly shaping your future. And here's something powerful to understand. The moment you become aware of your patterns, you create space to change them. Awareness is the beginning of control. Without awareness, you repeat. With awareness, you choose. But choosing differently is not easy, because the moment you step outside your old patterns, you will feel discomfort, doubt, fear, uncertainty. And most people interpret that feeling as a sign to stop. But what if that feeling is actually a sign that you're finally moving forward? Because in the next chapter, we're going to talk about something that keeps people trapped more than anything else: fear. Not the obvious kind, but the subtle, invisible fear that quietly controls your decisions every single day. And once you see it, you'll realize it's been running your life for far longer than you thought. Chapter 3. The fear that feels like logic. There is a kind of fear that doesn't look like fear. It doesn't make your heart race. It doesn't make you freeze. Instead, it sounds reasonable. It sounds like, I'll wait until I'm ready. I need more stability first. It's too risky right now. And because it sounds logical, you trust it. But here's the truth most people never realize. Fear doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers and calls itself logic. This is the invisible barrier, the one that keeps people working harder but never moving forward. You see, fear has evolved. It's no longer just about physical danger. In today's world, fear shows up as hesitation, as overthinking, as delay. And the most dangerous version of it is when it convinces you that staying the same is the safest choice. Because if you never move, you never risk failing. But here's the catch. If you never move, you also never grow. And over time, that safe choice becomes the most expensive decision you ever make. As discussed in the material, people often hold themselves back not because they lack opportunity, but because they don't believe they deserve more, or they're afraid to reach for it. That fear doesn't announce itself. It hides behind hesitation. It tells you, who do you think you are? What if you fail? What will people say? And slowly, it shrinks your world. You start aiming lower, playing smaller, settling, not because you want to, but because fear made it feel like the smart move. Now let's go deeper. There are 3 core fears that quietly keep people stuck. The first is the fear of losing. This is the one most people recognize. You're afraid to invest because you might lose money. Afraid to start because it might not work. Afraid to change because you might fall behind. So instead, you protect what you have. But here's the problem. When your focus is avoiding loss, you automatically limit your upside. You stop taking calculated risks. You stop exploring new paths. You stop growing. And in trying not to lose, you guarantee that you won't win. The second fear is the fear of judgment. This one is quieter, but even more powerful. It's the fear of looking foolish, of being misunderstood, of people questioning your choices. So you stay where it's comfortable, where no one questions you, where you blend in. But understand this, The moment you start thinking differently, you will stand out. And that discomfort is the price of growth, because you cannot build an uncommon life by making common decisions. And the third fear, the one almost nobody talks about, is the fear of responsibility. Because success is not just freedom, it's pressure, it's accountability, it's expectations. And deep down, some people avoid growth because they're not ready to carry what comes with it. So they stay in a space where less is expected, where they can remain unnoticed, where they don't have to rise. But here's the truth. Avoiding responsibility doesn't protect you. It limits you. Now pause for a second. Which one of these fears do you recognize in yourself? Fear of losing? Fear of judgment? Fear of responsibility? Be honest, because the moment you identify it, you take away its power. And here's something you need to understand clearly. Fear is not the enemy. It's a signal that you're standing at the edge of growth. But most people misinterpret that signal. They feel fear and they step back. The wealthy feel fear and they lean in. Same emotion, different response, different outcome. And this is where the shift begins, because once you realize that fear is part of the process, you stop waiting for it to disappear. You move with it. You act despite it. You grow through it. And over time, what once felt terrifying becomes normal. Let that sink in. Everything you want exists on the other side of what you've been avoiding. But here's the next layer. Even if you overcome fear, there's something else that quietly keeps people stuck. Something that feels productive, but actually drains your progress every single day. In the next chapter, we're going to expose one of the biggest hidden traps of modern life, the illusion of being busy, and why working harder is often the very thing keeping you poor. If you have watched the video up to this point, please write in the comments which country you are from. It is very interesting to see which corners of the world our viewers come from. Chapter 4. The Trap of Being Busy. There's a dangerous illusion in today's world. It's not laziness. It's not lack of effort. It's something far more deceptive. It's the illusion of progress. You wake up, you check your phone, you respond to messages, you go to work, you complete tasks, you stay busy all day, and at the end of it, you feel exhausted. But if you're honest, nothing really moved forward. No real growth, no real change, no real progress, just motion. And this is where most people get trapped, because busyness feels productive. It gives you the sensation that you're doing something important. But here's the truth. Being busy is not the same as building. And the difference between the poor and the wealthy often comes down to this one distinction. The poor trade time for tasks. The wealthy build systems that work without them. Let's break that down. If your income depends entirely on your time, you are always limited. There are only so many hours in a day, only so much energy you can give, only so much you can physically do. So no matter how hard you work, there's a ceiling. But if your income is connected to systems, now everything changes, because systems scale, systems grow, systems operate even when you're not there. And this is the shift most people never make, because they're too busy surviving to step back and build. As reflected in the ideas from EA, modern systems often reward those who understand how money flows, not just those who work for it. And here's the uncomfortable reality. Working harder inside a broken system does not fix the system. It just drains you faster. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine someone working 10 hours a day. They earn more by working more. But what happens when they get tired? When they get sick? When they burn out? Income stops. Now compare that to someone who builds something once, and it continues generating value over time. An online product, an investment, a digital asset, a business system. They may have worked intensely at the beginning, but over time, the effort decreases while the results continue. That's leverage, and leverage is what separates effort from expansion. Now, here's the key question. Why don't more people focus on building systems? Because systems require something most people avoid: delayed gratification. You don't see immediate results. You don't get instant rewards. You don't feel progress right away. And in a world addicted to instant feedback, that feels uncomfortable. So instead, people choose what feels productive now. Even if it keeps them stuck later, they answer emails, scroll through updates, handle small tasks, and convince themselves they're moving forward. But deep down, they know they're not. Let me ask you something. How much of your day is spent reacting versus creating? Reacting to messages, reacting to problems, reacting to other people's priorities, versus creating something that moves your life forward. Because if most of your time is reactive, you are living someone else's system. And that system is not designed to make you free. It's designed to keep you occupied. And here's the hard truth. If you don't control your time will control you. Now, don't misunderstand this. Work is important. Effort matters. Discipline is necessary. But direction is everything. You can work 12 hours a day and still stay in the same place, or you can work 4 focused hours and build something that grows beyond you. It's not about doing more. It's about doing what actually moves the needle. And this requires a shift in thinking. From what do I need to do today to what can I build today that will still matter tomorrow? Because the wealthy don't just ask, how do I earn? They ask, how do I multiply? And once you start asking that question, everything begins to change. Your focus shifts, your priorities shift, your actions shift, and slowly your results follow. But there's something else you need to understand, even if you break out of the busyness trap. Even if you start thinking about systems, there's still one major obstacle that can pull you back. Something subtle, something constant, something that quietly drains your focus every single day. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about one of the biggest silent killers of progress in 2025, distraction, and why most people are not losing because they lack ability, but because they lack control over their attention. Chapter 5, The War for Your Attention. There has never been a time in history where your attention was under attack like it is today. Not your time, not your money, your attention, because attention is the new currency. And whoever controls it, controls your life. Think about your average day. How many times do you check your phone? How many notifications pull you away? How often do you start something and never finish it? A message, a video, a scroll, another distraction, and suddenly hours disappear. Not because you chose to waste them, but because they were taken from you. Quietly, strategically, and repeatedly. As hinted in the mindset patterns from discipline isn't just about doing hard things. It's about resisting the constant pull toward easy distractions. Because distraction is not random. It's engineered. Every app, every feed, every notification is designed to keep you engaged, to keep you scrolling, to keep you reacting, to keep you consuming instead of creating. And the more you consume, the less you build. Now, let's connect this to wealth, because this is where it gets serious. If your attention is scattered, your results will be scattered. If your focus is weak, your progress will be slow. If your mind is constantly reacting, you will never have the clarity required to build something meaningful. And this is exactly why so many people stay stuck. Not because they lack intelligence, but because their attention is fragmented, pulled in every direction. And here's the part most people don't realize. Distraction doesn't just steal your time. It steals your potential. Every hour you spend scrolling is an hour not spent building. Every moment you spend reacting is a moment not spent thinking deeply. Every time you switch focus, you weaken your ability to create, because real progress requires depth, and depth requires uninterrupted attention. Let me ask you something honestly. When was the last time you spent 1 full hour completely focused on something that actually moves your life forward? No phone, no interruptions, no distractions, just pure focus. For most people, that moment is rare. And that's the problem, because while one person is distracted, another person is building. While one person is scrolling, another person is learning. While one person is reacting, another person is creating. Same 24 hours, different results. Now here's where the shift begins. The wealthy don't just protect their money, they protect their attention, because they understand something most people ignore. Where your attention goes, your life follows. So they design their environment differently. They limit distractions. They create focus. They choose what deserves their energy. And most importantly, they say no. No to things that don't matter. No to noise. No to constant stimulation. Because every yes to distraction is a no to progress. Now, this doesn't mean you need to disappear from the world. It means you need to become intentional. Intentional about what you consume. Intentional about what you focus on. Intentional about where your energy goes. Because your attention is not infinite. It's a resource. And just like money, if you spend it carelessly, you will have nothing left for what truly matters. Now imagine this. What would happen if you reclaimed just 1 hour a day of pure, uninterrupted focus? No distractions, no noise, just building. As echoed in the idea from Ma, even one focused hour a day can completely change the direction of your life. 1 hour learning a skill, 1 hour building something, 1 hour thinking strategically. That's 365 hours a year. That's transformation. But most people never experience that because their attention is constantly being pulled away. And over time, that scattered focus becomes a scattered life. Now, here's the truth you need to hear. You don't need more time. You need more control over the time you already have. Because time without focus is wasted. But time with focus is power. And once you start protecting your attention, you start building momentum. And momentum changes everything. But there's still one more layer to this. Even if you gain control of your attention, even if you start focusing deeply, there's something else that determines whether you grow or stay stuck. Something that shapes your decisions without you even realizing it. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about your environment, the people you're around, the conversations you hear, the standards you accept, because whether you realize it or not, your environment is either pulling you up or holding you down. And once you see how powerful that influence really is, you'll never look at your surroundings the same way again. Dear viewer, we strive to create high-quality videos for you. Please assist us in improving our efforts by commenting on what you like about the video and what you would change or add. We would be very grateful. Chapter 6. The environment that shapes you. You might think your life is the result of your decisions, but here's a deeper truth. Most of your decisions are shaped by your environment, the people you talk to, the conversations you hear, the standards you're surrounded by. All of it is programming you, quietly, consistently, powerfully. Because humans adapt. You adapt to what you see daily. You adapt to what feels normal. You adapt to what is accepted around you, and over time, that normal becomes your ceiling. Let me explain. If you're surrounded by people who complain about money, you will start seeing money as something stressful. If you're surrounded by people who avoid risk, you will start seeing risk as something dangerous. If you're surrounded by people who settle, you will start believing that settling is reasonable, not because you chose it consciously, but because you absorbed it. And this is why environment is so powerful, because it doesn't ask for your permission. It shapes you whether you realize it or not. As reflected in the mindset patterns from many people stay stuck because they keep looking outward instead of taking ownership. But that outward focus is often reinforced by the environment they're in. Now think about this. How many of your beliefs are truly yours? And how many were inherited from family, from friends, from society? Ideas about money, ideas about success, ideas about what's possible. Most of them were given to you before you were even aware enough to question them. And once those ideas settle in, they feel like truth, but they're not always truth. They're perspective, and perspective can be changed. Now, here's where things get real. If your environment doesn't support growth, it will resist your change, not always aggressively, sometimes subtly, through doubt, through jokes, through skepticism. You're overthinking it. That's not realistic. Just be grateful for what you have. And those words can pull you back into your old patterns, not because they're right, but because they're familiar. And familiarity is comfortable. But comfort is not growth. Let me say that again. The environment that makes you comfortable is often the same environment that keeps you stuck. Now, this doesn't mean you need to cut everyone off. It means you need to become aware of what influences you, aware of what you're absorbing, aware of what's shaping your thinking, because once you become aware, you can start choosing differently. You can start exposing yourself to new ideas, new perspectives, new standards. You can start listening to people who think bigger, who build differently, who challenge your current beliefs. And slowly, your internal world begins to shift. Because here's the truth. You don't rise to your goals. You fall to your environment. If your environment supports growth, you grow. If your environment supports stagnation, you stay. It's that simple. Now let's take it one step deeper. In a 2025, your environment is no longer just physical. It's digital. What you watch, what you listen to, what you scroll, all of it is shaping your thinking. If your feed is filled with negativity, you will start thinking negatively. If your feed is filled with distractions, you will struggle to focus. If your feed is filled with people building, learning, growing, that becomes your new standard. So ask yourself, what kind of environment are you living in? Not just physically, but mentally, because your mind is your true environment. And whatever you feed it will grow. Now, here's the shift. The wealthy don't just change their habits, they change their environment. They put themselves in rooms where growth is normal, where expansion is expected, where thinking bigger is the baseline. And over time, that environment reshapes them. So, if you feel stuck right now, don't just look at your effort, look at your surroundings. Because sometimes the reason you're not growing is because you're planted in the wrong soil. And once you change the soil, growth becomes inevitable. But even with the right environment, even with awareness, there is still something that determines whether you take action or stay stuck. Something internal, something deeply personal. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about identity, who you believe you are. Because at the end of the day, you will never outperform the version of yourself you accept. And once you understand that, you'll realize that changing your life starts with changing who you think you are. Chapter 7. The identity that holds you back. There is a version of you that you quietly believe you are, not the version you show the world, not the version you wish you were, but the version you accept deep down. And that version is controlling everything, your decisions, your habits, your limits. Because no matter what you say you want, you will always act in alignment with who you believe you are. Let that sink in. You can want success. You can dream about freedom. You can imagine a completely different life. But if your identity says, "I'm not that kind of person," you will sabotage every opportunity that challenges that belief. Not consciously, but automatically. Because your mind is wired for consistency. It wants your actions to match your identity, even if that identity is holding you back. As reflected in the deeper mindset layers from what you believe you deserve directly shapes what you go after. And more importantly, what you allow yourself to receive. Now let's explore this. If you see yourself as someone who struggles with money, you will make decisions that reinforce struggle. If you see yourself as someone who just gets by, you will unconsciously avoid opportunities that require expansion. If you see yourself as someone who isn't ready, you will keep delaying action, not because you lack ability, but because your identity doesn't match the result. And this is why change feels so hard, because real change is not about doing more. It's about becoming someone different. Let me ask you something. When you think about wealth, what comes to mind? Do you see it as something natural or something distant? Do you feel like it's something you can grow into or something reserved for others? Be honest. Because your answer reveals your identity, and your identity reveals your future. Now here's the truth. Most people never hear, "You don't get what you want. You get what you believe you are." That's the real game. So if you want to change your results, you cannot just change your actions. You must change your self-image. And that starts with awareness. Start noticing how you talk to yourself. The quiet thoughts, the automatic reactions, the assumptions you make about what's possible for you. "I'm not good at this. I've never been that type of person. That's just not for me." These aren't facts. They're scripts. And those scripts were written over time, through experiences, through failures, through other people's opinions. But here's the powerful part. What was learned can be unlearned. Now, this doesn't happen overnight. You don't wake up one day and suddenly feel like a completely different person. But you can start shifting it, one decision at a time, one action at a time. Because every time you do something that challenges your old identity, you weaken it. And every time you reinforce a new pattern, you strengthen a new version of yourself. For example, if you've always seen yourself as someone who avoids risk, start taking small, calculated risks. If you've always seen yourself as someone who procrastinates, start acting immediately on small decisions. If you've always seen yourself as someone who struggles, start proving to yourself daily that you can create progress. Because identity is not fixed, it's built through repetition, through evidence, through action, and over time. Your mind starts to update. It starts to say, maybe I am capable, maybe I can do this, maybe I'm becoming someone different, and that maybe is the beginning of transformation. Now, here's something important. The wealthy don't just think differently, they see themselves differently. They see themselves as builders, as creators, as problem solvers, and because of that identity, they act accordingly. They take opportunities seriously. They step into challenges. They move with confidence, not because they know everything, but because they trust themselves to figure it out. That's identity. And once that identity is in place, growth becomes natural. Now pause for a moment. Who have you been telling yourself you are? And more importantly, is that version of you helping you grow or keeping you stuck? Because here's the truth. You can keep your current identity and keep your current life, or you can challenge it and step into something bigger, but that choice is yours. And in the next chapter, we're going to take this even further, because once you start shifting your identity, you'll face something that stops most people from continuing, something subtle, but incredibly powerful. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about comfort and why the very thing that feels good in the moment is often the thing that quietly destroys your future. Dear viewer, hang on a sec. Hey there, dear viewers, write in the comments what you'd like us to talk about in the next video. We promise to read all the comments and pick the best and most relevant topics. Thanks. Chapter 8. The comfort that keeps you stuck. Comfort feels good. That's why it's dangerous. It doesn't look like a problem. It doesn't feel like a threat. In fact, it feels like peace. Waking up without pressure. Doing what you already know. Staying within your limits. No stress. No risk. No uncertainty. Just comfort. But here's the truth most people never question. Comfort is not safety. It's stagnation disguised as stability. Because nothing grows in comfort. Not your skills, not your mindset, not your income. Growth lives in tension, in challenge, in uncertainty, in moments where you're not sure if you can handle what's ahead. And that's exactly why most people avoid it. They chase comfort, and unknowingly, they stay exactly where they are. Now let's connect this to your life. How many times have you chosen what feels easy instead of what moves you forward? You delay the hard task. You avoid the difficult conversation. You stick to what you know. And each time, you reinforce the same pattern because comfort is addictive. It rewards you immediately. You feel relief. You feel relaxed. You feel in control. But that reward comes with a cost, a hidden cost, time. Because while you stay comfortable, nothing changes. Days pass, weeks pass, months pass, and one day you look back and realize you're in the same place. As highlighted in the discipline principles from the real battle isn't about knowing what to do. It's about forcing yourself to act when everything inside you wants to stay comfortable. That's the real fight, not against the world, but against your own resistance. Now here's where it gets deeper. Comfort doesn't just affect your actions, it shapes your standards. If you stay in comfort too long, you lower what you expect from yourself. You stop pushing. You stop demanding more. You stop growing. And slowly, you start accepting less. Less progress, less ambition, less possibility. And because it happens gradually, you don't notice it until it becomes your new normal. Let me ask you something honestly. Are you living in growth or in comfort? Are your days challenging you or repeating themselves? Are you building something new or maintaining what already exists? Because your answers reveal your direction. Now here's something powerful. The wealthy don't avoid discomfort. They seek it. Not because they enjoy struggle, but because they understand what it produces. Growth, expansion, opportunity. They know that every level of life requires a new level of discomfort, new challenges, new risks, new responsibilities. And instead of resisting that, they lean into it because they've trained themselves to associate discomfort with progress. Now imagine that shift. Instead of asking, how can I stay comfortable? You start asking, where am I avoiding growth? That one question changes everything, because now you're not running from discomfort. You're using it as a signal that you're about to level up. Now, this doesn't mean you need to suffer constantly. It means you need to be intentional about stepping outside your limits. Daily, small actions, consistent challenges. Because growth doesn't come from one big leap. It comes from repeated exposure to discomfort. You build resilience. You build confidence. You build strength. And over time, what once felt uncomfortable becomes normal. Let that sink in. The things you avoid today could become easy tomorrow if you face them. Now here's the truth you need to hear. Every time you choose comfort over growth, you delay the life you want. And most people don't realize how often they make that trade every day in small ways that add up over time. Now pause for a moment. Where in your life are you choosing comfort when you know you should be choosing growth? Be honest, because that awareness is your turning point. And once you start making different choices, even small ones, your trajectory begins to change. But there's still something deeper. Even if you break out of comfort, even if you start taking action, there's one habit that silently destroys progress more than anything else. Something so common, most people don't even see it as a problem. In the next chapter, we're going to expose one of the biggest hidden behaviors that keeps people stuck for years. Procrastination. Not the obvious kind, but the subtle, everyday delay that slowly steals your future. Chapter 9. The delay that destroys your future. Procrastination doesn't look like failure. It looks like waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for more clarity. Waiting until you feel ready, and because it feels reasonable, you don't question it. But here's the truth. Procrastination is not about time. It's about avoidance. Avoidance of discomfort, avoidance of uncertainty, avoidance of responsibility. And the longer you delay, the heavier everything becomes. Think about it. That one decision you've been putting off. That one step you know you should take. That one move that could shift your direction. It's still there, waiting, not because it's impossible, but because you haven't acted. And every day you delay, you reinforce the habit of inaction. Because procrastination isn't just a behavior, it's a pattern, and patterns become identity. You start seeing yourself as someone who delays, someone who hesitates, someone who will do it later, and later becomes never. As reflected in the mindset patterns for me, most people don't fail because they lack goals. They fail because they never stay focused long enough to execute consistently. Now, let's go deeper. Why do people procrastinate? It's not because they're lazy. It's because action feels uncomfortable. Starting something new creates uncertainty. Making a decision creates pressure. Taking responsibility creates risk. So instead, the mind looks for relief. And that relief comes in the form of delay. I'll start tomorrow. I need to think about it more. I'll do it when I feel ready. But here's the problem. You will never feel ready because readiness doesn't come before action. It comes after. Confidence doesn't come before you begin. It comes because you begin. Clarity doesn't come from thinking endlessly. It comes from doing. Let that sink in. Most people are waiting for a feeling. That only comes through movement. So they stay stuck. Not because they can't move, but because they're waiting for permission from their emotions. And emotions are unreliable. They change daily. They react to comfort. They avoid difficulty. So if you let your emotions decide when you act, you will always choose the easy path. And the easy path leads nowhere. Now here's something important. Procrastination doesn't just delay progress. It creates mental weight, unfinished tasks, unmade decisions, unresolved thoughts. All of it builds pressure in your mind, and that pressure drains your energy. You feel overwhelmed even when you're not doing much, because your mind is carrying everything you've been avoiding. Now imagine the opposite. You act immediately. You make the decision. You take the step. You move forward. Suddenly, that weight disappears. Your mind clears. Your energy increases. Your momentum builds. Because action creates relief, not avoidance. Now here's the shift you need to make. Stop asking, when should I start? Start asking, what's the smallest action I can take right now? Because progress doesn't require perfection. It requires movement. Small steps, repeated daily. That's how momentum is built. And momentum is what changes everything. Because once you start moving, it becomes easier to keep moving. The hardest part is the beginning. Now, let me ask you something. What have you been delaying? That one thing you keep thinking about. That one decision you keep avoiding. That one step you know matters. Be honest, because that's your starting point. And here's the truth you need to hear. Your future is being shaped by what you do today, not what you plan to do later. So if you keep delaying, you're not just pausing your progress, you're shaping a future that looks exactly like your present. Now, this might feel uncomfortable, but that discomfort is awareness, and awareness is power. Because now you see it, now you understand it, and now you can change it. But there's one more layer. Even if you take action, even if you stop delaying, there's something else that determines how far you go. Something that separates those who start from those who actually succeed. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about discipline. Not the motivational version, but the real version. The one that shows up when you don't feel like it. The one that carries you when motivation disappears. Because motivation starts the journey, but discipline is what finishes it. Dear viewer, please write in the comments how you like the video. Do you like it? Or is there anything you would improve? Please let us know so that we can make good, high-quality videos for you. Thank you very much. Chapter 10. Discipline, the bridge between who you are and who you could become. Motivation feels powerful. It gives you energy. It gives you vision. It makes you feel unstoppable for a moment. But then it fades. And when it fades, most people stop. That's why motivation alone is not enough, because motivation is emotional. And emotions are temporary. They rise, they fall, they change with your mood, your environment, your energy. So if your progress depends on motivation, your progress will always be inconsistent, and inconsistency kills growth. Now here's the truth most people don't want to hear. You don't need more motivation. You need more discipline. Because discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't care if you're tired. It doesn't care if you're inspired. It doesn't care if the conditions are perfect. It shows up anyway. And that's the difference. Motivation gets you started. Discipline keeps you going. Now let's get real for a moment. How many times have you felt motivated, started something strong, and then slowly stopped? A new habit, a new goal, a new plan. You were excited at the beginning, but when things got difficult, you slowed down. When it became repetitive, you lost interest. When results didn't come fast enough, you questioned yourself. That's not failure. That's lack of discipline. And it's one of the biggest reasons people stay stuck. As reinforced in the principles from A, discipline is the ability to act even when every part of you wants to avoid it. That's the real definition. Not perfection, not intensity, consistency, doing what needs to be done, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's boring, even when you don't feel like it. Because here's the truth. Success is not built on the days you feel good. It's built on the days you don't. Now think about that. Anyone can show up when they're motivated. Anyone can act when they feel inspired, but very few people can act when they feel nothing. Or worse, when they feel resistance. And that's where discipline lives, in the quiet moments, in the unseen effort, in the repetition that no one applauds. Because discipline is not exciting. It's not glamorous. It's not something people celebrate daily. But it's the foundation of everything. Now let's go deeper. Discipline is not something you're born with. It's something you build through decisions, small ones, daily ones, because every time you choose action over comfort, you strengthen discipline. Every time you follow through, you reinforce trust in yourself. Every time you keep going, you build momentum. And over time, that momentum becomes identity. You start seeing yourself differently, not as someone who tries, but as someone who executes. And that shift changes everything. Now, here's something important. Discipline is not about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing something consistently, even if it's small, even if it's not perfect, even if it feels insignificant, because small, consistent actions compound. They build over time. They create results that seem invisible at first, but powerful later. Now imagine this. What if you committed to just 1 hour a day of disciplined effort? No distractions, no excuses, no negotiation. As emphasized in, even one focused hour a day can completely transform your trajectory. 1 hour learning, 1 hour building, 1 hour improving, 365 hours a year. That's not small. That's life-changing. But most people don't do it, not because they can't, but because they don't stay consistent. They start, they stop, they restart. And that cycle keeps them in the same place. Now here's the shift. Stop focusing on big changes. Focus on daily discipline because big changes are built on small actions. Repeated without interruption. And over time, those small actions create a new version of you. Stronger, more focused, more capable. Now let me ask you something. Where in your life do you lack discipline? Be honest. Is it your time, your focus, your habits? Because that's your leverage point. That's where your growth begins. And here's the truth you need to hear. Discipline is choosing what you want most over what you want now. And most people choose what they want now. Comfort, ease, distraction. But those choices lead to long-term frustration, while discipline leads to long-term freedom. Now pause for a moment. What would your life look like if you became disciplined? If you followed through on what you started? If you showed up daily? If you stopped negotiating with yourself? Think about that. Because that version of you is not far away. It's built through decisions, starting today. But there's one more layer to this. Even with discipline, even with consistency, there's something that determines whether your effort actually turns into results. Something that separates movement from multiplication. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about leverage, the concept that allows the rich to grow faster, while others stay limited, because effort alone is not enough. And once you understand leverage, you'll realize why working harder is not the answer. Chapter 11, Leverage, the force that multiplies effort. There is a reason some people work less and earn more. It's not because they're lucky. It's not because they're smarter. It's because they understand something most people never learn: leverage. And once you understand this concept, you will never look at work the same way again. Because here's the truth. Effort creates income, but leverage creates wealth. Let that sink in. Effort is linear. You work 1 hour, you get paid for 1 hour. You work more, you earn more. But there's always a limit. Because you are the source, your time, your energy, your presence. And once those are exhausted, growth stops. That's the trap. Now leverage is different. Leverage allows you to produce results beyond your personal effort. It allows one action to create multiple outcomes. It allows your work to continue working even when you stop. And this is where the wealthy operate. Not in effort alone, but in systems of multiplication. Now let's break this down simply. There are 4 main forms of leverage in today's world: time leverage, skill leverage, technology leverage, capital leverage. Let's start with time. If you're doing everything yourself, you are limited. But if you learn to delegate, to collaborate, to build systems that operate without you, you expand your capacity. Now, your output is no longer tied only to your time. Next is skill leverage. This is where you develop abilities that scale. Communication, problem solving, strategy. Skills that allow you to influence outcomes at a higher level. Because not all effort is equal. 1 hour of high-value thinking can be worth more than 10 hours of low-level tasks. Now, let's talk about technology. This is where 2025 has changed the game. One person can now build something that reaches thousands. A digital product, a platform, a system. And once it's created, it continues to produce. Without constant effort, that's leverage. And finally, capital. Money used to create more money, investments, assets, opportunities, where your resources begin to multiply themselves. Now, here's the key insight. The wealthy focus on leverage. The poor focus on effort. And that's why the gap keeps growing, because effort has limits, but leverage expands. Now let's connect this to your life. If all your income comes from your time, you are always trading time for money. And there's nothing wrong with that at the beginning. But if you stay there, you stay limited, because your growth depends on how much you can do. Now imagine shifting that. Instead of asking, how can I work more? You start asking, how can I multiply this? How can one action create multiple results? How can I build something that continues without me? How can I turn effort into systems? That shift changes everything. Now here's where most people get stuck. Leverage requires patience. It doesn't always pay immediately. It requires upfront effort with delayed reward. And most people don't like that. They want immediate results, immediate feedback, immediate income. So they stay in effort-based work because it feels predictable. But predictable doesn't lead to expansion. Now let me ask you something. Are you building something or just maintaining something? Are your actions creating future value or only present income? Because that distinction defines your direction. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to change everything overnight. You just need to start thinking differently. Start small. Start asking better questions. Start looking for opportunities to create leverage, even in simple ways. Automate something. Learn a scalable skill. Build something once that can be used multiple times. Because leverage is not a one-time shift. It's a mindset. And once that mindset is in place, you start seeing opportunities everywhere. Now, here's the truth you need to remember. The goal is not to work harder. It's to make your work work for you. And that requires a different way of thinking, a different way of acting, a different way of building. But there's something else you need to understand, even with leverage, even with systems. There is one factor that determines whether your efforts actually compound or fall apart over time. Something internal, something invisible. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about consistency at a deeper level. Not just doing things daily, but sustaining momentum over time. Because starting is easy, but maintaining progress, that's where most people fail. And once you understand why, you'll realize that success is not about intensity, it's about endurance. Chapter 12, Consistency, the hidden engine of wealth. Most people don't fail because they start wrong. They fail because they stop. They begin with energy. They begin with excitement. They begin with intention. But over time, that energy fades, and when it fades, so do they. This is where the real separation happens. Not at the beginning, but in the middle, because the middle is where it gets boring, repetitive, unseen, unrewarded, and most people can't stay there long enough to win. Now, here's the truth. Consistency is not about intensity. It's about endurance. It's not about doing everything perfectly. It's about showing up again and again and again, even when it feels like nothing's happening. Now let's get real. How many times have you started something only to stop halfway? A plan, a habit, a goal. You were committed at the start, but when results didn't come fast enough, you questioned it. When progress felt slow, you lost interest. When life got busy, you paused, and that pause became permanent. That's the pattern. Start, stop, restart, and every time you repeat that cycle, you reset your progress. You lose momentum. You lose confidence. You lose trust in yourself. And over time, You start believing that you can't follow through. But that's not the truth. The truth is, you haven't stayed consistent long enough to see results. Because real results are delayed. They don't show up immediately. They build quietly, under the surface, until one day they become visible, as reflected in the mindset principles from the people who win are not the ones who do the most. They're the ones who stay focused the longest. Let that sink in. It's not about doing more, it's about staying longer. Now let's connect this to wealth. Wealth is not built in days, it's built in habits, repeated daily, investing regularly, learning consistently, building continuously, and over time, those small actions compound. That's the key word, compound, because consistency creates momentum, and momentum creates acceleration, and acceleration changes everything. Now here's the challenge. Consistency is not exciting. There's no applause, no instant reward, no visible progress at first. And that's why most people quit. They mistake silence for failure. They think nothing is happening, so they stop. But something is happening. It's just not visible yet. Let me give you an example. Imagine planting a seed. You water it daily. You take care of it. You show up consistently. But for days, nothing happens. No growth, no change, no visible result. Now, most people would stop. They'd think it's not working. But what they don't see is what's happening beneath the surface. Roots are forming, strength is building, and eventually, growth appears. That's how progress works. Invisible first, visible later. Now apply that to your life. The habits you build today, the discipline you maintain, the actions you repeat, they are all planting seeds, and those seeds will grow, but only if you stay consistent. Now, here's the shift you need to make. Stop chasing quick results. Start committing to long-term patterns, because quick results fade, but consistent habits last. And over time, they create a life that looks completely different. Now let me ask you something. Where have you been inconsistent? Be honest. Is it your focus, your discipline, your effort? Because that's your leverage point. That's where your growth is waiting. And here's the truth you need to remember. You don't need to be perfect. You need to be persistent. Because persistence beats talent. Persistence beats motivation. Persistence beats almost everything. Now imagine this. What if you stayed consistent for 1 year? No stopping, no restarting, no excuses, just steady progress, day after day. Who would you become? What would you build? What would change? Think about that, because that version of you is not far away. It's built through consistency, starting now. But there's one more layer. Even with consistency, even with discipline, there is something that determines the direction of your effort. Because you can be consistent and still move in the wrong direction. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about clarity, knowing what to focus on, knowing what actually matters. Because effort without direction is wasted. And once you gain clarity, your progress becomes intentional. Chapter 13. Clarity, the direction that determines everything. You can work hard, stay disciplined, remain consistent, and still go nowhere. That's the reality most people never confront. Because effort without direction is just movement. And movement is not the same as progress. Now, let's pause for a moment. If you were asked right now, what exactly are you building? Would you have a clear answer? Not a vague idea, not a general hope, a clear direction. Because here's the truth. If you don't know where you're going, every path feels like progress. And that's dangerous because it creates the illusion of growth while keeping you in the same place. Now let's break this down. Most people operate without clarity. They wake up and react. They follow routines without questioning them. They chase opportunities without understanding them. And over time, they end up busy, but not fulfilled. Active, but not advancing. Because clarity is not just about goals. It's about understanding what matters, what doesn't, and why. As reflected in the principles of focused effort from R, intentional time creates transformation, but only when it's directed toward something meaningful. Now here's the deeper layer. Clarity requires thinking, real thinking, not scrolling, not reacting, not consuming, but sitting with your thoughts, asking questions, challenging assumptions. And that's something most people avoid because thinking deeply is uncomfortable. It forces you to face reality. It forces you to confront uncertainty. It forces you to take responsibility. So instead, people stay distracted because distraction is easier than clarity. But easy doesn't lead to direction. Now let me ask you something. What do you actually want? Not what sounds good, not what others expect. What do you truly want to build? Freedom? Financial independence? A different lifestyle? Be specific. Because vague goals create vague actions, and vague actions create vague results. Now here's something powerful. Clarity simplifies everything. When you know what matters, you stop wasting energy on what doesn't. You stop chasing distractions. You stop saying yes to everything. You stop spreading yourself thin. Because now you have direction. And direction creates focus. Now let's go deeper. Clarity also protects you. It protects you from opportunities that look good, but don't align. It protects you from distractions that feel urgent, but aren't important. It protects you from wasting time on things that don't move your life forward, because once you're clear, you become selective, and selection is power. Now here's the truth. The wealthy don't just work harder, they think clearer. They know what they're building. They know where they're going. They know what matters. And because of that, their actions are intentional. Every move has purpose. Every decision has direction. And over time, that clarity compounds into results. Now let's make this practical. If you feel stuck, don't ask, what should I do next? Ask, what actually matters right now? What is the one thing that would move your life forward the most? Not 5 things, not 10, 1. Because clarity is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters. Now imagine this. You wake up tomorrow with complete clarity. You know your direction. You know your priorities. You know your next step. How different would your day look? How different would your decisions be? That's the power of clarity. It removes confusion. And confusion is one of the biggest reasons people stay stuck. Because when you're confused, you hesitate, you overthink, you delay, you avoid action. But when you're clear, you move, and movement creates momentum. Now, here's something important. Clarity is not something you find once. It's something you refine over time, through experience, through action, through reflection. Because as you grow, your direction evolves. But the habit of seeking clarity, that stays. And that habit becomes your compass. Now let me ask you again, what are you building? Take a moment, because your answer is shaping your future. And here's the truth you need to remember. Clarity turns effort into progress, and progress into results. Without it, you drift. With it, you build. But there's still something deeper, even with clarity, even with direction. There is one factor that determines whether you actually execute or stay in planning mode, something that holds people back, even when they know exactly what to do. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about execution, taking action at a higher level because knowing is not enough. Understanding is not enough. Planning is not enough. Execution is where everything becomes real. And once you master that, your life stops being an idea and starts becoming a result. Chapter 14. Execution, where your life actually changes. There is a silent gap that destroys more potential than failure ever could. It's not lack of knowledge, it's not lack of ideas, it's the gap between knowing and doing. Because knowing feels powerful. You understand the strategy, you see the path, you recognize what needs to be done. But then, nothing happens. Days pass, weeks pass, and the plan stays in your mind instead of becoming your reality. That's the execution gap, and most people live there, forever preparing, forever learning, forever getting ready, but never actually moving. Now here's the truth. Your life does not change when you understand more. It changes when you execute more. Let that sink in. Because understanding without action is just entertainment, and execution is transformation. Now let's get real. Why don't people execute? It's not because they don't know what to do. It's because action feels exposed. When you act, you risk failure, you risk judgment, you risk uncertainty. So instead, you stay in thinking mode. Because thinking feels safe, planning feels productive, learning feels like progress, but none of those create results. Only action does. As reflected in the mindset patterns from real change only begins when you stop waiting and start taking responsibility through action. Now here's the deeper layer. Execution is not just about taking action. It's about taking action fast. Because speed creates momentum, and momentum builds confidence. The longer you wait, the heavier the action feels. The more you think, the more doubt you create. The more you delay, the harder it becomes to start. That's why speed matters, not reckless action, but decisive action. Moving before your mind talks you out of it. Now let me ask you something. How many ideas have you had that you never acted on? How many opportunities have passed because you waited too long? How many times have you said, "I'll start soon," and never did? That's not a lack of ability. That's a lack of execution. And here's the cost. Every idea you don't act on, someone else will. Every opportunity you delay, someone else will take. Every moment you hesitate, you lose momentum. Because the world rewards action, not intention. Now here's the shift. Stop trying to be perfect. Start trying to be in motion. Because perfection is just procrastination in disguise. Waiting for the perfect time, the perfect plan, the perfect conditions. But here's the truth. Perfect doesn't exist. Action does, and action is what creates clarity, not the other way around. Now let's make this practical. When you have an idea, act on it immediately, not tomorrow, not later, now, even if it's small, even if it's imperfect. Because small action breaks resistance, and once resistance is broken, momentum begins. Now here's something powerful. Execution builds confidence, not the other way around. You don't wait to feel confident to act, you act, and confidence follows. Because every time you take action, you prove to yourself, I can move, I can create, I can handle this, and that proof builds belief. Now imagine this. What if you became someone who executes immediately? No delay, no overthinking, no hesitation, just action. How different would your life look? How much faster would you grow? How many opportunities would you create? That's the power of execution. It compresses time. It accelerates results. It turns ideas into reality. Now here's the truth you need to remember. Ideas don't change your life. Executed ideas do. And most people have more ideas than they'll ever use, but without execution, those ideas mean nothing. Now pause for a moment. What is one thing you know you should act on right now? Not later, right now. Because that's your next step, and your future depends on it. But there's something even deeper. Even if you execute, even if you take action consistently, there is one factor that determines how fast you grow. Something that multiplies your progress without increasing your effort. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about learning, not passive learning, but strategic learning, because in 2025, the people who learn faster earn faster. And once you understand how to learn effectively, you will accelerate your growth in ways you never thought possible. Chapter 15, Learning, the skill that accelerates everything. There is one ability that quietly determines how fast you grow. It's not talent. It's not connections. It's not even hard work. It's how quickly you can learn. Because in a world that is constantly changing, the person who adapts fastest wins. And here's the truth. Your income grows in direct proportion to how fast you can learn, apply, and adapt. Let that settle in, because this is where many people fall behind. Not because they stop working, but because they stop learning effectively. Now let's be clear. There are two types of learning: passive learning and active learning. Passive learning is easy. Watching videos, scrolling through content, listening without applying. It feels productive, but it doesn't change your life, because information without action is just noise. Active learning is different. It's focused. It's intentional. It's applied. You don't just consume. You use, you test, you implement, you adjust, and that's where real growth happens. As reflected in the mindset from training your mind is not about absorbing more information. It's about developing clarity and control under pressure. Now here's the deeper layer. Most people learn slowly because they learn randomly. They jump from topic to topic, from idea to idea, from one piece of content to another, without direction. And that creates confusion, because scattered learning leads to scattered thinking, and scattered thinking leads to weak execution. Now compare that to someone who learns strategically. They focus on what matters. They study with purpose. They apply immediately. And because of that, their growth accelerates. Now let me ask you something. What are you currently learning? And more importantly, is it moving your life forward? Because not all learning is equal. Some knowledge entertains you. Some knowledge transforms you. And the difference is application. Now here's something powerful. You don't need to learn everything. You need to learn the right things. Skills that create leverage. Skills that increase value. Skills that open opportunities. Because in today's world, skills are currency. The more valuable your skills, the more valuable your time becomes. And the more valuable your time becomes, the more you can earn. Now let's connect this to reality. In 2025, information is everywhere. Anyone can access knowledge, but very few people apply it. and that's the gap. The difference between those who stay stuck and those who grow is not access. It's execution of what they learn. Now here's the shift. Stop consuming endlessly. Start applying immediately. Learn something, use it, test it, refine it. Because learning is not complete until it becomes action. Now imagine this. What if every day you learned one thing and applied it immediately? Not stored it, not saved it, used it. Over time, that would compound. Your skills would grow, your thinking would sharpen, your confidence would increase, and your results would follow. Because applied knowledge creates momentum. Now here's something important. Learning also changes your perspective. It expands what you see as possible. It challenges your old beliefs. It introduces new ideas. It opens new paths. And once your perspective shifts, your decisions shift, and your decisions shape your life. Now let me ask you something. Are you learning to grow or just learning to feel productive? Be honest, because there's a difference. One creates results, the other creates illusion, and most people get stuck in the illusion. Now here's the truth you need to remember. You don't need more information. You need better application. Because information without action changes nothing. But information applied changes everything. Now pause for a moment. What is one skill that could change your life if you mastered it? Think about that. Because that's your focus, that's your leverage, and that's where your growth begins. Now here's the shift. Stop chasing motivation. Start building systems. Because systems don't rely on feelings, they rely on structure, and structure creates consistency. Now here's the truth you need to remember. Your habits are either carrying you forward or holding you back. So choose them carefully. Now pause for a moment. What is one habit that is currently holding you back? And what is one habit that could move you forward? Because that's your starting point. That's your leverage. And that's where your transformation begins. But there's one more layer. Even if you build strong habits, even if you stay consistent, there is something that determines whether your efforts actually lead to freedom or just keep you in a cycle of work, something bigger, something structural. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about money itself, not in the way most people understand it, but in the way it actually works. Because until you understand money, you will always be chasing it. And once you understand it, you can start controlling it.